A castle so massive it took 28 years to build and was never finished. A media empire so powerful it could start wars and topple presidents. And a fortune so vast it made Rockefeller nervous. William Randolph Hearst didn't just build wealth. He constructed an American dynasty that rewrote the rules of power itself. Most people know Hearst from history books or that Orson Welles movie. What they don't know is how a spoiled California kid transformed his father's failing newspaper into a propaganda machine that shaped an entire century. We're talking about a man who owned 28 newspapers, 18 magazines, and enough real estate to make modern billionaires look modest. But here's what makes his story different. Hearst didn't accumulate power through innovation or genius. He weaponized information itself. The foundation started with George Hearst, William's father, who struck it rich in Nevada silver mines and South Dakota gold. George was a rough prospector who barely read, yet he understood leverage. When he bought the San Francisco Examiner in 1880, it wasn't about journalism, it was about political influence. Newspapers back then were tools, not businesses. You bought them to push agendas, settle scores, and control narratives. William grew up watching this. Born in 1863, he had everything money could buy except discipline. Harvard kicked him out for pranks. His mother, Phoebe, wanted him civilized through European tours. Instead, young William studied something else entirely. While touring newspaper offices in New York, he saw Joseph Pulitzer's world turning yellow journalism into gold. Sensational headlines, lurid crime stories, and manufactured outrage sold papers by the millions. In 1887, William convinced his father to let him run the Examiner. George thought it would teach the boy responsibility. What happened next shocked everyone. William didn't just run the paper. He transformed it into something California had never seen. He poached top writers from Eastern papers, offering salaries that seemed insane. He sent reporters into dangerous situations for stories. He invented headlines that screamed rather than informed. The strategy worked. Within 2 years, circulation exploded. But William wasn't satisfied dominating San Francisco. He wanted New York, the real prize. In 1895, he bought the New York Journal and immediately declared war on Pulitzer's world. What followed was the most vicious media battle in American history. Both papers raced to the bottom, printing increasingly outrageous stories. Truth became optional. Illustrations showed events that never happened. Sources were fabricated. Readers ate it up. Then came Cuba. Spanish colonial rule was brutal, but American newspapers made it sound apocalyptic. Hearst sent artist Frederick Remington to Havana to document atrocities. Remington cabled back that everything seemed quiet. Hearst's alleged reply became legendary. "You furnish the pictures, I'll furnish the war." Whether he actually said it doesn't matter. He did exactly that. The journal published inflammatory stories about Spanish barbarism, many completely false. When the USS Maine exploded in Havana Harbor, Hearst's papers screamed Spanish sabotage before any investigation began. Public outrage followed. Congress voted for war. The Spanish-American War lasted 4 months and made America a global power. Hearst's papers claimed credit, and circulation soared past 1 million daily. This was the moment William Randolph Hearst discovered something crucial. Control the narrative and you control everything else. He expanded relentlessly. By 1925, Hearst owned newspapers in every major American city. His morning and evening papers reached 20 million readers daily. That's 1 in 5 Americans getting their news from a single source. But newspapers were just the beginning. He launched magazines like Cosmopolitan, Good Housekeeping, and Harper's Bazaar. He created newsreel companies that showed in movie theaters. He bought radio stations before most people owned radios. The money poured in, and Hearst spent it faster than it arrived. He collected European castles, dismantling them stone by stone and shipping them to America. His art collection rivaled museums. He owned entire warehouses filled with artifacts he'd never seen. But his obsession was San Simeon, the California hilltop estate he called La Cuesta Encantada, the Enchanted Hill. Construction began in 1919 and consumed Hearst's attention for decades. The main house alone had 115 rooms. 3 guest houses surrounded it, each larger than most mansions. Indoor and outdoor pools featured tiles imported from ancient Roman baths. A private zoo held the world's largest private animal collection. Zebras, giraffes, and exotic birds roamed freely. The estate grew to 250,000 acres, larger than many American cities. Hollywood stars, politicians, and international dignitaries received invitations to San Simeon like royal summons. Charlie Chaplin, Cary Grant, Winston Churchill all made the pilgrimage. Hearst controlled the guest lists, the conversations, and the coverage. If you wanted favorable press, you visited the castle. If you offended Hearst, your career could end. His political influence peaked in the 1930s. Hearst's papers could make or break candidates. Franklin Roosevelt courted him carefully during the 1932 election. But when FDR's New Deal threatened Hearst's business interests, the entire newspaper chain turned hostile. Hearst deployed his media army against the president, running front-page attacks daily. Roosevelt survived, but barely. No president since has ignored Hearst's lesson about media power. Yet something was shifting beneath the surface. The Great Depression devastated advertising revenue. Hearst's spending never slowed. He borrowed heavily, using his media empire as collateral. By 1937, he owed over $125 million, equivalent to billions today. Banks circled. For the first time, William Randolph Hearst faced something his money and influence couldn't fix. His empire was collapsing and the vultures were gathering. What happened next would determine whether the Hearst dynasty survived or joined the forgotten fortunes of American history. The solution came from an unexpected source. Hearst's lawyers convinced creditors that liquidating the empire would destroy its value. Better to reorganize under professional management. In 1937, William Randolph Hearst surrendered control of his own creation. A board of trustees took command. They sold newspapers, magazines, real estate. The art collection went to auction. Entire warehouses emptied. San Simeon's construction stopped mid-project. Hearst watched his empire dismantled piece by piece, powerless to intervene. He retreated to the castle, now more prison than palace. The man who once dictated American politics couldn't even control his own checkbook. Trustees approved every expense. His legendary parties ended. The zoo animals were donated. Hearst wandered halls filled with treasures he could no longer claim as his own. Marion Davies stayed. The actress who'd spent decades as Hearst's mistress proved more loyal than his business partners. She quietly paid many of his personal expenses from her own fortune. When Hearst needed medical care, Davies sold jewelry to cover costs. The irony was devastating. The man who'd spent hundreds of millions now depended on his girlfriend's charity. But Hearst refused to disappear quietly. He still controlled editorial direction at his remaining papers. World War II reignited his influence. His anti-communist stance, once considered extreme, suddenly aligned with national sentiment. Circulation stabilized, revenue improved. By 1945, the trustees began loosening restrictions. Hearst never regained full control, but he reclaimed enough authority to matter. His newspapers championed conservative causes, opposed labor unions, and warned about Soviet expansion. The Cold War gave William Randolph Hearst a final act. Politicians who'd previously avoided him now sought his endorsement. His papers remained influential until his death in 1951. He died at 88 in Beverly Hills, not San Simeon. Heart failure claimed him quietly, without drama. The empire he'd built survived, but barely. His 5 sons inherited a fraction of what once existed. Most of the newspapers were gone. The magazines struggled. The art collection had scattered across museums and private collections. Yet the Hearst Corporation endured. His son, William Randolph Hearst Jr., took control and surprised everyone. Where his father had been reckless and imperial, the son proved cautious and strategic. He sold struggling newspapers and invested in television stations. He bought radio networks and magazine publishers. He modernized operations his father had run like personal fiefdoms. The transformation worked. By the 1960s, Hearst Corporation was profitable again. Not at the scale of its golden age, but stable and growing. The 3rd generation entered management, then the 4th. Each brought professional discipline their ancestor had lacked. They diversified into cable television, digital media, and international markets. Today, Hearst Corporation generates over $11 billion annually. They own ESPN with Disney, operate dozens of television stations, and publish magazines that define American culture. Cosmopolitan, Esquire, Elle, Car, and Driver. Their digital properties reach hundreds of millions monthly. The company employs 20,000 people across 50 countries. The castle became a California state park in 1958. Over 850,000 visitors tour it annually, paying admission to walk through rooms where Hearst once entertained presidents. The estate generates millions in tourism revenue. San Simeon achieved the immortality its builder craved, just not the way he imagined. But here's what makes the Hearst story genuinely remarkable. The family still controls the corporation, not through public shares or corporate boards, but through a family trust established after William Randolph Hearst's death. 13 family members serve as trustees. They appoint management, approve strategy, and maintain privacy. No quarterly earnings calls, no shareholder revolts. The Hearst family runs a multi-billion-dollar empire exactly as they choose. This structure is nearly extinct in American business. Most founding families lose control within 3 generations. Market pressures, inheritance taxes, and family disputes destroy dynastic wealth. The Hearsts avoided that fate through ruthless discipline. The trust mandates unanimous decisions on major issues. Family members who want out can sell their beneficial interest but not their voting control. The corporation stays intact. Their wealth remains difficult to calculate. The trust owns the corporation, and the corporation isn't publicly traded. Estimates suggest the Hearst family fortune exceeds $20 billion, split among roughly 60 descendants. Most live quietly, avoiding publicity their great-grandfather craved. They've learned the lesson he never did. Real power doesn't require public recognition. The irony cuts deep. William Randolph Hearst built his empire on publicity, spectacle, and shameless self-promotion. He wanted everyone to know his name, see his castle, and acknowledge his power. That compulsion nearly destroyed everything. His descendants achieved lasting success by doing the opposite. They operate in shadows, make decisions privately, and let the business speak for itself. Walk through San Simeon today and you'll see the contradiction perfectly preserved. The Neptune pool still gleams with imported tiles. The Gothic study still holds priceless artifacts, but the rooms feel empty, frozen in time like a museum to excess. The castle Hearst built to proclaim his immortality instead became a monument to the limits of ego. Meanwhile, his great-great-grandchildren sit in corporate offices managing media properties that shape modern culture. They wield influence their ancestor would recognize, but they do it quietly. No castle, no zoo, no front-page crusades. Just steady professional control of information and entertainment. That's the real Hearst legacy. Not the yellow journalism or the castle or the art collection. It's the understanding that power survives longest when it operates invisibly. William Randolph Hearst learned that lesson too late. His family learned it perfectly. The dynasty he nearly destroyed through excess now thrives through restraint. The name he made famous through spectacle now succeeds through discretion. American media still runs partly on Hearst money, Hearst strategy, and Hearst influence. You just don't see it anymore. And that's exactly how they want it. The castle on the hill still draws crowds who pay to glimpse how power once lived. Down in boardrooms across America, the family that built it quietly shapes what you read, watch, and believe. William Randolph Hearst wanted to be remembered as the man who controlled everything. He got his wish, just not the way he planned. His descendants don't need monuments or headlines. They learned what their ancestor never could. The loudest voice in the room is rarely the most powerful. True control whispers. And in the silence between what you see and what actually runs the world, the Hearst dynasty continues doing exactly what it's always done. Furnishing the narrative while you furnish the attention.